Hey guys.
So it's safe to say there are quite a lot of well-known superhero movies out there, for good reasons and for bad reasons alike. You got your Dark Knights and Logans, and you have your Suicide Squads and Amazing Spider-Man 2s, all of which, despite being talked about in different ways, are pretty well known.
However, I am not here to talk about those types of movies. No. I am here to talk about the movies that odds are you never even knew about. Then again, I didn't know much about them until I watched them, so there is that. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, let's get started with an actual good film. Even though it's technically a web series, I'm putting it on here because not enough people had seen it, and it's actually really fun, guys. You should watch it. Now, granted, this movie isn't perfect. It does have a few flaws that hold it back from being truly amazing, but what can you do, I guess? The effects in this movie are pretty good for the budget they are on, but some of the shots do look a little bit wonky. If you're expecting great acting like in the MCU, odds are you're probably not gonna find it in this movie. The performances are actually pretty good, but the delivery of these characters can seem a bit corny at points, which does seem a bit off-putting for some of the scenes. This seems to come out of the characters of Obadiah Archer and Armstrong, who seem a little bit out of place for the film. I would usually watch scenes of really great tension build up and feel really on edge, and then these guys come out and it just seems like a cartoon. And finally, the villain has no dimension whatsoever. Can't seem to remember her motives, and her character just seemed like a Phase 1 MCU antagonist. But honestly, when looking at this movie as a whole, in general, those are kind of minor nitpicks. Even though I said the effects were pretty wonky at times, they were usually pretty good for the most part. The occasional corniness of the performances actually works fairly well in this movie, surprisingly. Considering that it's lower budget, I do give it a bit of a pass. Whenever Archer and Armstrong show up, it's actually when I'm the most entertained. Their dynamic is just really enjoyable, and while cartoonish at times, does show that this movie isn't taking itself too seriously.
Oh, you have the money for the charity?
Yes, sir. Almost 200 euros.
Perfect. Barkeep, my tab.
That's for the children. Sir, that's for the children.
However, I'd say if there's two things in this movie that are really good, it's the action and the casting. The action in this movie is fast-paced and fun to watch. I especially like the scene where Ninjak and Bloodshot fight, and the plane fight is just really well executed, and it really keeps you engaged throughout. Like, how is Ninjak going to beat a guy with healing powers? And how is he going to save a little girl while fighting a supervillain? Finally, the casting is actually really good in this movie, and these actors do a really good job embodying their characters. John Hennigan is really good as the Eternal Warrior, and I believe that Jason David Frank is actually a better Bloodshot than Vin Diesel. Granted, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this one. Don't at me on that. However, if I had to pick one actor that stood above the rest, I would go with Michael Rowe as Ninjak. This guy honestly seems like the best actor out of the bunch, and he really embodies the James Bond Batman-esque character of Ninjak very well in this movie. Considering that he also played Deadshot in the CW, I guess it makes sense that he would have some great acting chops. Heck, he can probably slip into an MCU movie and I wouldn't even tell that he's out of place. Overall, don't go into this movie expecting anything amazing, but I guarantee you will have fun. And I'd say with all the recent superhero movies being massive team-ups, comedies, or trying to do something new with the superhero genre, sometimes it's just good to have a little bit of fun. So I am going to give this movie a B. It's a fun movie. Go see it.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Swamp Thing is pure camp. This movie might be one of the oddest things I have ever seen. It's not good, but it's also not really bad either. I'd say it's okay. It's in this weird limbo area where I can't really decide if it's either. Like I said in the beginning, this movie is 80s campiness, which does actually work in this movie's favor. If this movie was made today with this kind of direction, odds are I would hate it. But since it isn't, I actually kind of like it. The effects are pretty good, not as good as other 80s movies, but still good. I especially like the scene when one of the characters gets set on fire. I don't know if it's practical or not, but I'd say it looks pretty cool. Finally, the actors in this movie are doing a pretty good job. Adeline Barbeau does a good job as the leading woman of this movie. There are some scenes where she just becomes the Sarah Connor of this movie, and it's amazing. However, I'd say the two greatest performances in this movie are Reggie Batts as Jude and Dick Durock as Swamp Thing. Whenever Jude shows up in this movie, he makes it a whole lot more watchable. And he honestly has some of the best lines of dialogue in the movie.
Oh shit. There goes the neighborhood.
I'm surprised Reggie hasn't been in any other movies besides this one, because I honestly think he'd be like the best part of any of them. Dick Durock, on the other hand, is probably the best actor in the movie, which is good, because in a movie called Swamp Thing, you'd probably want the best actor to be, you know, Swamp Thing. The sadness of his situation and the performance of Durock make Swamp Thing a tragic character. You honestly feel bad for the guy. He lost his regular body and the woman he loved, but we will talk about that more later. However, this movie does have its share of bad things that kind of balance out the good. The tone of this movie is very odd, and I can't really tell what it really wants to be. Is it romance, drama, action, comedy even? You could call it a multiple genre movie, but that seems a bit loose for me. It's the movie that is trying too hard to be multiple things at once. But apparently it isn't, because this movie's official genre is horror. What the fuck? Throughout this entire movie, I only got surprised like once. And that was kind of unironically anyway, so it doesn't even count. I mean, it could be because it's PG and they wanted to make the kid horror friendly, but it also has nudity, so there's that. The villain is also very weird. He wants to capture Swamp Thing for evolution, I guess. I don't know, but he is very bland, so I don't need to talk about him very much. However, the main issue I have with this movie is that it doesn't really revolve around Swamp Thing. I like the main lead, but if we had Swamp Thing as the main character, we could get more complexity out of him, and feel his internal struggle more than if he was a horror character. I'm also weirded out about how Adeline Barbeau and pre-Swamp Thing immediately fall in love. You guys met for a day, are you horny or something? At the end of the day, this is an odd movie. It's very kiddish and cheesy, so adults might not watch it, and kids shouldn't really watch it because of mild horror tropes and nudity. But if you want to turn your brain off and look at a movie with its campiness and overall entertainment, then it should be right up your alley. So I am going to give this movie a C-. I hope they don't get worse from here. This movie is alright. There are some flaws, but not enough for me to call it a bad film. Although I can see why it was lost to time, because on its own, there's nothing really that's all that memorable about it. I mean, the main reason it was made was to launch a TV series, which did not happen, so in that regard, kind of failed. For me, this movie is basically a James Bond movie, but it would probably be at the lower end of the spectrum. First off, I should probably start by talking about the giant elephant in the room. David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury. As we all know, in the MCU, this character is played by Samuel L. Jackson, so seeing this version of him does seem a little bit odd. However, in the comics, he was originally white, so I can't bash this movie too much on that front. The main reason I feel this version is different from Nick Fury is mostly attributed to his personality. Even though I don't know what Nick Fury did in the comics when he was white, I'm pretty sure he'd have a better mindset than this. When I see Nick Fury, I picture Samuel L. Jackson's stone-cold SHIELD agent with his calm but fierce exterior, his skill at keeping a level head despite tough issues, and his ability to bring people together for the greater good. All of which are aspects I can't really say for David Hasselhoff's Nick Fury. It seems like he's trying to be James Bond, except more masculine and without the charisma. This Nick Fury is not cold and intelligent. He is a punch first, ask questions later type who honestly has some very weird lines of dialogue.
Don't let the blue blood fool you, Pierce. Val's an old hand at the sexpionage game, aren't you? I'll get that vampire's blood if I have to suck it from her neck.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not.
Oh, hi, Mark.
I get that he is an agent in this movie, but even an agent Nick Fury would probably be more mature than this. Honestly, I feel like Hasselhoff could have been a good Hellboy if he was given the role. He smokes, he has a temper, and he has a very gruff tone of voice, so I feel like that could fit in pretty well. But sadly, this is this movie. And while he isn't a bad character, I can't really say he's great as Nick Fury. At least, not what we've come to expect from him at this point. This movie itself, though, is actually alright. It's an average, enjoyable spy action movie, mostly due to the energy, action, and Sandra Hess as the Viper. Pacing in this movie is pretty fast, and can be a bit much at times, but it does keep you engaged for the most part, and it doesn't waste your time. The action, while not great, is fairly enjoyable, especially the Nick Fury versus Viper fight, and Sandra Hess is probably the main reason I decided to continue watching this movie to begin with. Her performance is over the top, and she generally seems like she's having fun with it. I'd say out of all these movies, she's probably the best villain I've watched. And even though I can't say her acting is the best, it does add a layer of likableness to her character, even if she is an agent of Hydra. However, I will admit this movie does have its fair share of issues. While the special effects are not present too much, when they are, it's kind of disturbing. Especially the helicarrier in this movie, which looks like shit. Oh my god. Who designed this thing? I know this was made in 1998, but god damn, could you have picked a worse overtone of color and shape? Ew. Just as an example of how bad the acting can get, here is a clip from the movie. So in the movie, this telepath, I think, is trying to get information from Sandra Hess in order to get the code to deactivate this missile launcher. And this is what the scene looks like. You guys know what kind of acting this is, right? Although not all the performances are like this, I wouldn't call them good either. There are some points where the plot doesn't make sense, especially this one scene when Viper temporarily knocks out Nick, but she poisons him instead of killing him right away. As well as the scene where Nick uses his life model decoy to take a bullet for him, despite LMD not even having been on screen to go on the mission with them. He comes out of nowhere, honestly. In total, this is basically a 90s action movie. It has smoking, guns, action, cheesy dialogue, and an over-the-top villain. Granted, it's not as good as those movies, but it does have a fair amount of entertainment for those who are into them. With all that said now, I am going to give this movie a C. Okay, on to the last one.
A quantum supercomputer calculating for 1,000 years could not even approach the number of fucks I do not give.
Okay, now I can get back to something a bit more modern, thank goodness. And to be honest, I don't know if I can qualify this as a superhero movie, but it does carry a lot of traits, so why not, I guess. And it's also based on a book. I just wanted to tell you that because I haven't read the book, so please don't yell at me in this review. Anyways, I Am Number 4 is meh. This movie is balanced out by both pros and cons, but not in the same way that something like Swamp Thing is. I'd say the pros stand out more, but then again, the cons also kind of even it out to the point where this movie is just meh. I don't know, but it just is. I mean, surely it can't have been produced to that level of an extent that it'd end up this way. Oh. Yep, now I get it. Now, this movie isn't bad. In fact, there are actually a few good things about it. The effects look pretty good, and it really does help spice up the fight scenes. In the climax of the movie, it has two super-powered aliens taking on a group of evil aliens with two giant dogs fighting each other, which is honestly the best part of the movie. I also like the world this is set in. I know we have seen aliens in our world stories before, but the way this story is told actually makes it a bit more interesting. I also like the characters of Sam and Number 6. The scenes with them actually make the movie a little bit better. Whenever Number 6 is on screen, she's basically Black Widow from space, and she has probably the best fight scenes in the movie when she is on screen. Sam, on the other hand, is kind of the everyman in this situation, and he might have the best arc in the movie, going from getting bullied to space gun wielding helper by the end of the film. He also probably has the best line of dialogue in the movie.
Wait, what Xbox?
However, that pretty much ends all the good things. Everything else is kind of bad. The romance subplot is okay, but we never really get anything important out of it and doesn't seem to go anywhere besides one scene. The high school setting is relevant, but just seems so generic, and the bully plot is never even solved. He just helps out the main character while not even apologizing to the guy he was mean to in the first place. And the directing is also kind of odd. An example of this would be during the climactic fight scene when the villain throws a space grenade at one of the heroes. It lands right next to her, and the camera cuts to her being like 7 feet apart of that explosion. That is hilarious. However, I would say that the biggest problem of this movie might be the acting. Now, granted, the acting isn't bad. I actually like it probably the second best out of these films, but it's mostly just bland. Take the main character, for example. I'm pretty sure Alex Pettyfer is a good actor, but honestly, he just seems so bored in this movie. These actors are doing alright, but I feel like they're kind of disconnected with each other, and the chemistry seems like it's being sacrificed for plot purposes. Really, John Smith is the main problem of this movie, which is bad because he's the main character. You can't have your main character be the worst thing about this movie, otherwise it drags the film down with them almost. This makes the conversations with him and the others seem fake. The bond with his guardian seems fake. His friendship with Sam seems fake. And his relationship with Sarah seems fake. Him being around these characters really brings them down from the potential they might have. Almost to the point when they're kind of just used as plot devices for the story. The villain, or villains, I guess, in this story, are also kinda crappy. They don't even seem to carry much of a presence. They don't interact with the heroes until the end of the movie. Now, I get the whole purpose was for the heroes to evade them, but you can still do this in other ways of establishing that they are a threat. Otherwise, they come off as forgettable. In fact, that's what I'd say this movie is. It's forgettable. Not bad, not good, just forgettable. It's sad, really, because this movie had quite a lot of potential. If the acting and directing were better, I'd say this is a pretty good movie, a classic even. But sadly, this movie doesn't have those things. So, at the end of the day, I'm going to give this one a C-. Well guys, that's all I'm gonna do for today. I am honestly glad I watched these movies because now I know the difference between a good unknown movie and a meh unknown movie. It's nice to look at something fun, interesting, and different from what I normally watch today. In fact, if you want to, all these movies are apparently free on YouTube, so you can watch them if you want. I Am Number 4 actually has 2 versions, which are what I like to call the Sonic version and the snail version, both of which can be annoying because one version seems too fast and the other seems too slow. However, on the laptop, you can actually adjust the speed and settings so it seems more like a normal movie. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see y'all next time.